Evening, everybody. Welcome to this 14 Fish Facebook Live. The AKT exam is now just a couple of weeks around the corner. And so this is very much focused on how you can maximize your score in those last 2 weeks. I guarantee if you try some of the techniques that I'm going to talk about, you will definitely increase your score by at least a few points. And those few points might well make all the difference. So I put together a few sort of tips about the exam, and I'm going to divide it into the clinical side, the stats and admin, and then I'm going to talk very clearly about exam technique just before the exam and what to do on the day to maximize your score. A lot of this is covered in the 14 Fish past the AKT package, but I just want to remind those of you who are on the package about some of those tips, and for those of you who aren't, just to try and help you along as well. So my name is Mark Cooman, and I've been an MRC GP examiner for over 20 years, and I specialize in helping people through the exam. And so hopefully I'll bring some of that experience for you tonight. At the end of the, I'm probably only going to talk for about 15 or 20 minutes, but at the end of that, time, I'm very happy to answer questions on any topics that you want. We can talk about the CSA, we can talk about the AKT. There'll be some of you who are actually not doing the exam for some months, and that's absolutely fine. In real time, the preparation for the AKT, you need to give yourself at least 3 months. And so if you're listening to this and doing the AKT later in the year, that's absolutely great. Okay, so when we get some questions at the end, any of you who've seen one of our AKT or CSA Facebook Lives will have met Liz, who hates being on it. And so she's going to ask the questions. We've already had some questions before we started, so you'll be seeing Liz a little bit later. So let's start with clinical. So let's divide the questions up into clinical and the statistics and the admin. So let's start with clinical. Clinical accounts for 80% of all the questions and 80% of the marks. So this is your big this is the area where you're going to score lots of points. I'm going to talk about some specialist areas in a minute, but don't forget the vast majority of questions in the AKT are your common clinical problems. It would be a ridiculous exam about general practice if we didn't ask you about common stuff. So common things are common, and common general practice stuff is the main bulk of the exam. A lot of your friends and people who've sat the exam before will go, I had a terrible question about Huntington's chorea or whatever, and you'll think I don't know about that. Well, really, those are very rare. So the vast majority are common things, and the easiest questions are to ask about your long-term conditions. So asthma, diabetes, COPD, hypertension management, all of those videos that we've covered in the past the AKT package. So you need to identify, so you've got 2 weeks to go, you need to identify those clinical areas where you might be able to increase some points. And you can do that in a number of different ways. The way that we would recommend on the package is to do a 100-item AKT and look at your feedback. And the feedback will tell you where you didn't score well in, and then you should go to those areas, go to those videos, have another look. When you hear something on the video, make sure that you pause it and then think to yourself, how am I going to remember that? Write it down, make some anagrams, go into patient.co.uk, find another way of explaining it, ask somebody in the practice. But those little areas that you struggle with in the common diseases are really important. If you don't have access to the package, then what you should be doing is probably going through the first 5 chapters of the BNF. Hopefully, you'll have summarized those BNF chapters, but if you haven't, go back to the BNF and look for those topic areas and look for those drugs that you find difficult to remember. Think about the sort of things that the examiners might want to ask questions on. When it's very clear cut, let's say the dose of adrenaline in anaphylaxis, the dose is very clear, it's right or wrong. It's much easier to write a question on something where there is a clear right or wrong answer. The other thing that I would do, and I'm sure most of you have done it already, is look at the RCGP AKT feedback statements. So there's feedback on every exam, and what you should be looking at is thinking about, is there anything on those that you haven't thought about? Because the areas that candidates found difficult is going to come up again. And so when I was looking today about the feedback from the last exam, the two things that sprung to mind were the DMARDs, so the disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drugs. That was in the list of areas where people struggled. And so if you were going to look at those, I would want to look at the common interactions in general practice and where we get into trouble. You know, one of the biggest areas of problems in general practice in prescribing is something that's really important. So it does feature in the AKT. So I'd definitely have a quick look at DMARDs and the drug interactions and how we can minimize risk in general practice. And the other thing that was in the comments was about identification and management of alcohol problems in general practice. And I think as a registrar, you may not see some of these chronic older patients, and particularly if you're in a practice where you don't see much of that problem. So if you're in a rural or a semi-rural practice, you're unlikely to see it. So have a quick look at that. It's not a huge topic, but there's almost certainly going to be a couple of questions in there. So admin and stats, probably let's start with practice admin. So if I was setting the exam in 2 weeks, the two areas that I would look at would be the DVLA at a glance. It's very, very easy. It's updated on a regular basis. It's very, very easy to ask questions about the length of time that you need to have off after you've had a stent or after a stroke. Or the rules on epilepsy. So have a look at those, and you can get those free online. The other thing is controlled drugs. Controlled drugs is a big area of issues and potential mistakes in primary care. And so make sure that you know the rules about prescribing controlled drugs and equivalent dosages. So you know, what's the equivalent dosage of Oromorph, of MST, of Zomorph, because that's an easy question to ask, and it's really important. You know, we do see a lot of people who come out of hospital on oxycodone or on fentanyl patches. What's the equivalent dose? Because you need to know that, and so it's likely that there's going to be a question on it. On to stats now. Stats in the exam are general practice stats. There's been a slight change in emphasis in the last year or so, but very much about general practice stats. You are provided a calculator to work them out, but I think that although that was a response to candidate feedback that you ought to have a calculator, but in all honesty, I'm not completely convinced you should need to use it. The vast majority of answers are round figures like 5 or 10 or 15. Or if there was a decimal place, it would be 1 decimal place. So if you work it out and you come up with, you know, at 5.14389, it's wrong. So go back and have a look at it again. So what would I do? I would watch the 14 Fish video on stats, which is about 45 minutes long, and I'd make some notes. And it's certainly the thing that I would do the night before the exam is to look at some formula. You need to look at sensitivity, specificity, the sort of stuff that comes up on a table, and so on. The other thing, when I said there was a change of emphasis, we're now getting quite a lot of data, aren't we, from the CCGs about prescribing and about referral data and things like that. So your practice manager has got quite a sort of pile of different tables and stats and what they mean and what they might mean. And so go and see your practice manager and get them to show you a few of the CCG style tables that they're being given, because you'll certainly get one of those in the exam this time. As I say, I've always struggled with stats myself, and so that's something that I would intend to have a look at the video now, but certainly revise any formula I find difficult to do the night before. Okay, so You know what to do with your clinical, you know what to do with the stats and the admin. Concentrate on the areas that you don't know. Don't go over stuff that you find relatively easy. And now what I would do is go to the Pearson VUE online. So you're all going to the Pearson VUE centres, so they're the driving test centres. Some of you may have passed your driving test there, so you know exactly what it's like. But I would go onto the Pearson VUE website, and they do an AKT tutorial, which gives you an idea of what it looks like on the screen. The more you can familiarise yourself with what's going to happen on the day, the less stress you are. The less stress hormones that you've got, the more rational you are going to be able to think. We all need to be a bit stressed. We all need to have a bit of adrenaline. But you know, your performance curve, it rapidly increases with a bit of adrenaline, but it rapidly goes the other way. So don't get yourself overstressed. You know, you've got to get yourself in the best state you possibly can. So once you've had a look at the Pearson VUE tutorial, make sure that you're happy with what's going to happen. Make sure you know where you're going. I have an appalling sense of direction. In fact, if you spin me around a couple of times, I'll probably get lost in my own house. So what I would suggest is definitely go and find out where the centre is. Go and find out where you're going to park. Make sure you've got the right money in your car so that when you get there, you're not worrying about parking. Or you know, get somebody you trust or a friend, you know, to take you down there. But make sure that you get there in plenty of time, and make sure that you know that you're going to get there in plenty of time, so you're not worried about it. As I say, we're doing everything we possibly can to reduce the stress of you getting there on time and in the right sort of place. So you're probably now the night before the exam. I would be revising my stats formula. I probably have a couple of things there of areas that I find difficult. Maybe steps in asthma. You know, maybe certain different drugs, but just a couple of things the night before. You shouldn't be staying up late. If you are doing cramming the night before the exam, you're in big trouble. So lots of my friends and mates at medical school used to take massive doses of caffeine and stay up all night and think that was a really good idea. It is a really bad idea, so don't do it. If you haven't done it the night before, you may as well go and see a film and not worry about it. But it is about your frame of mind. So you know, the night before your exam, you should talk to people that make you feel good and talk to people that give you confidence. I had a fantastic gran who who just thought I could leap small buildings in a single bound. And I'd ring her up, and at the beginning of the conversation, I'd be saying, there's no way I'm going to pass my AKT, you know, it's a complete disaster. And by the end, I came out thinking I'm going to do brilliantly, because she'd tell me how brilliant I was. And so, you know, make sure that you talk to people that are going to make you feel confident. And some of you will have, some of you will have rituals, you know, lucky coins, lucky pants, lucky shirt. You know, you might have a particular breakfast that you've always had, you know, before you go to the exams. It doesn't matter. What you've got to do is get yourself in the right frame of mind and feel as confident as you possibly can. So the night before, don't forget to go to bed on time. Go to bed early. You know, this isn't fun. Exams aren't fun. They are stress provoking, and this is a licensing exam. This is your career that's at stake. So actually, you're not going to feel brilliant, and you may not have a brilliant night's sleep. But what you need to do is go to bed. Go to bed and just lie there and just rest. Resting is almost as good as sleeping, but what you don't do is get up and start pacing around your house, you know, waking your children up, making lots of tea and coffee, doing your ironing. Don't do it. Just stay in bed and try and relax. Think about what you're going to do when you finish. Think about all the sort of positive things that have happened in your training. You know, you've passed loads and loads of exams so far, and you can definitely pass the AKT. So you already know where you're going, and so you don't need to worry about that. And you're going to get up the next morning, and it's exam day. So you'll either be sitting a morning session, or you'll be sitting in the afternoon. And obviously, depending what you do, make sure you're doing stuff that's not stressing you. You certainly shouldn't be going into work. If you're sitting the exam in the afternoon, you should have a chilled day in the morning at home. You do, as I say, keep getting yourself in the right frame of mind. Make sure that you've got all the correct ID. Go onto the RCGP website. It'll tell you exactly what you need. You're not allowed to take food or drink into the Pearson VUE centres. I think I said on the video, on the package, that you are, but actually you're now not. I think probably because some candidates poured their drinks all over the computer terminal, which blew the building up. But whatever it is, you're not allowed to. But you can take stuff, and make sure you have some breakfast and so on, and eat what you fancy. If you fancy porridge, brilliant, and if you fancy bacon and eggs, great. If you don't have breakfast, I genuinely would encourage you to eat something, because it's a 3-hour, 10-minute exam, and you will your blood sugar will go down. Definitely don't drink too much caffeine in whatever format, but particularly sort of coffee or sort of Pro Plus tablets. Don't take lots of caffeine. It stops you concentrating. It may keep you awake, but it stops you concentrating. So you're now in the exam. There are 2 really important things to do. Is you mustn't get stuck, and you must complete all questions. And when you go through the questions, you must answer them, whether you think you know the answer or not. So when you get to the end, and you will get to the end in your 3 hours, you must have answered every question, even if you guessed at certain points. I'm going to talk about the exact technique with the questions, but just to sort of on the side is people in exams suddenly have a bit of a panic, and they think, maybe I was asleep when a major event happened in medicine. It just isn't true. You've been in medicine now for 10 to 15 years, maybe even longer. And so something hasn't suddenly happened that you don't know about. So if you look at a question and there's a stem to the question that is something you've never heard of, it probably doesn't exist. There was a question a few years ago about the management of menorrhagia. And it was like, what are the first, second and third stages of management of menorrhagia? And in the choice box was something called nonoxynil 9. Now, I don't know if you know what that is, but nonoxynil 9 is a spermicidal gel. And loads of people put nonoxynil 9 because they'd never heard of it. Now, don't put nonoxynil 9. If you haven't heard of it, it either doesn't exist or it doesn't work. So don't look at something and think, I've never heard of that, it's definitely it. If you haven't heard of it, it doesn't exist. Brilliant. That's another of the stems that you can take out. So when you're dealing with the questions, there are some questions that you're immediately going to know the answer, and that's brilliant. You just put the answer down straight away. Don't worry about it, and definitely don't mark it for reviewing. There are going to be some questions that you think you know the answer. You're sort of 50-50, and you really go with your gut reaction, because we know that the chances are that if you're 50-50, then the one that you pick will be right. If you go back and choose it, the chances are you'll change it the wrong way. Even if you vaguely know the answer, make an answer and don't go back to it. The only questions that you should be reviewing, and up in the top of the screen, you will say there's a little tick box that you can click your mouse on, and that will mean you can review them at the end. And you definitely should review a small number, maybe 15 or 20. You certainly shouldn't be reviewing them all. That's a disaster. You certainly shouldn't be reviewing a large number, because it's a waste of time. You'll probably score the same or less than you would have if you didn't review at all. So you've got to pick the ones that you review. So you only review the ones that you think you know the answer, but it just won't come to mind. And when you see those, mark the same answer. We say 14 Fish, mark C, so the middle answer in the pack, and then put it for review and come back at the end. And the chances are, if you don't have time to come back at the end, it doesn't really matter. The fact is that you've gone through all of them and you've got to the end. We see a lot of people fail the AKT because they haven't answered the last 20 questions, and that's absolutely vital. So at the end, when you finished all the questions, and I would hope that you would be finishing at about 2.5 hours. So you've got to get moving. So get moving on the questions. Then you will be coming to the review screen. And what I want you to do is just review the ones that you flagged. And those are those few that I've said that you think you know the answer, you couldn't bring it to mind, but you wanted to go back. The other thing that I found, there may be questions or areas that you really need to think about. So stats, for example, or you may be like me and be a bit of a slow reader. So So I find questions with a large stem at the beginning, I find that really quite confusing. And so, and then I start to panic because I'm reading quite slowly. And I think my 45, 50 seconds that I've got for each question, I'm running out of time. And so actually I would see a large stem, or I'd see something on stats, or I would see something on diabetes, which I really have to think hard about. And I'll just click see and review it at the end. And that way I'm getting through the questions, and I'm getting through all of the questions that I genuinely know the answer. And at the end, I'll have plenty of time to think about the ones that I find difficult. So those are my sort of few tips, of what to do in the next couple of weeks. I really think if you concentrate on it in the next couple of weeks, you can definitely increase your score by a few, maybe even 5 to 10 points. So, use the next 2 weeks as well as you possibly can. It's not an enjoyable experience, but it is doable. And, we mark the AKT. It's not a peer reference thing. So it's not, it's not only 75% pass and 25% have to fail. It's a modified Angoff marking system. So there's a standard that we expect you to pass. So actually everybody could pass. So you can pass. Don't go in with a negative attitude. Even if you failed before, you definitely can pass. But in the next 2 weeks, make sure you really focus your revision so that you can do it. So, good luck over the next couple of weeks. And obviously, if you have any questions or you've got any problems between now and then, do get in touch with us. And certainly we'll be taking some questions now as Liz reappears out the corner.
Hi.
She said that so enthusiastically.
We've got quite a few questions since you've been talking, which is great. And thank you everybody for joining us tonight. The first question we had was, can you summarise missed OCP? I'm assuming you're going to know what that means.
Okay, so missed oral contraceptive pill, what we'll do, rather than answer specific clinical questions, is any clinical question, we'll post the answer on the AKT forum in the next couple of days. I think it is covered in one of the contraceptive updates, but specific clinical ones, because otherwise we'll end up sort of getting a bit stuck. We'll post that. We'll post that on the site in the next day or so. But as I say, if we can perhaps concentrate more on questions about the exam and exam technique, maybe.
Sure, and we'll link to the community and all the 14 Fish videos that Mark's referred to in the comment as well. So we'll answer those like Mark said in the comments. So someone has asked a similar question to one that we received earlier, which was, which asthma guidelines do we learn? The BTS or the SIGN or the NICE recent guidelines? Okay,
really important. Asthma guidance has been a little bit confusing recently, not only with BTS and SIGN, but also with something called GINA, which is the global initiative in asthma management. And that's quite a lot of what the hospital docs are using. If in any doubt, and you're wondering which guidance to go, get the latest version of the BNF and go with that. So the most likely thing, what you'll be asked on is the, I think it was October, November 2017 asthma guidance. That's what will be in the exam. So be aware of SIGN and NICE, but it'll be on the latest guidance. So the vast bulk of the AKT is set in March of the year that you sit it, and then obviously it's updated as guidance comes in. If there's been a massive shift in guidance, we tend to sort of try and remove those questions because it's so confusing. But by and large, go with what's in the BNF. You really can't go wrong with that. So have a look at the latest guidance in the BNF.
I just want to say to you, Vivian, I can see you've left us a comment just saying you've missed some of the video previously. After this video is finished, it will be posted to our Facebook page, so you can watch it back anytime you like, and you can skip forward to any parts that you've missed, or watch the whole thing through. So don't worry. We did have another question about statistics. So someone has asked, what about graphs and statistics? Yeah,
you can get graphs. There's only likely to be, the maximum of one. There has been sort of scattered diagrams. There've been forest plots. It's all covered in the stats video. I mean, think about the common things that occur in stats. So looking at trends, looking at p-values, sensitivity, specificity, the really big, number needed to treat, number needed to harm. That's the sort of stuff we want you to know as GPs, and so that's going to come in the exam. There may be an odd diagram. I mean, that's the thing. There is going to be some questions in the exam that you think are really hard or you struggle with. You've just got to think, there's only a few of those. They're there to really pick out your superstars. They're not for the likes of you and I. And so, if it's a really difficult question, don't worry about it. It's one of those things. Just put it down to experience. You might get something in statistics you don't know. Mark it as C, put it for review, just in case at the end you have a brainwave. But don't worry about it. Don't drag anxiety over a question into the next one. We not only see that in the AKT, but we see it in the CSA with people who have a difficult case, and then it then affects the cases afterwards. You've really just got to let it go. So if you don't know the answer, mark it as C, and then get on to the next question.
Not entirely sure what developmental delays mean, but I don't know if you.
What's the question?
It just says developmental delays. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. It's probably about developmental delays in pediatrics, and you certainly should have a look at the what would be a normal development for a child at 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. If you put RCGP, normal child development, there is quite a nice little thing on the RCGP website in their education. And equally, obviously, we've done the 6 week check video. The 6 week check is probably the commonest covered because it's the one thing now that we do in general practice, and we've got that in our clinical update library.
So someone's just written a question in as well. I don't know if this feeds into the one you've already answered, but for COPD, is it GOLD or NICE guidelines that you have to go through, or both? Okay, really good. Very good question. The reason that we talk a lot about GOLD in our clinical update, it was thought very much that the UK would adopt GOLD very quickly because it goes along with what everybody's doing in other chronic diseases. So your long-term conditions, particularly diabetes and asthma, is now very much about stratifying risk. So as opposed to putting people into a pathway, so everybody starts at the beginning and you go through, now it's looking at level of risk and plugging people in depending whether they're low, medium and high risk. So we very much thought that that the UK would go with GOLD, and that's why our clinical update talks a lot about it. But have a look in the BNF, what's in the latest BNF, and actually it's still, I think, nice. But I'll check that tonight. But I think it's still nice. Go with the latest BNF, what's in there. That'll be what comes up in the exam. So a question we had earlier in the week was if you found the 14 fish AKT package and you say only had 2 weeks to go or a month to go, I mean, how much time do you need, the minimum time do you need to make the most of the package? Okay, so a lot of independent research has been done on the AKT package, and the evidence would suggest that you need to do a minimum of 4 hours, which you've got 2 weeks. There's plenty of time. So if you did only find the AKT, pass the AKT package from us now, what you need to do is get on there, do the opening 2 videos which talk about the exam and exam technique, do a 100-item AKT in time, and then look at the feedback and then concentrate on the videos in which areas. So whether it's respiratory, do the COPD and asthma. If it's cardiac, do heart failure and chest pain. If it's neurological, do the dementia and Parkinson's. So do the thing, and then over the next few weeks concentrate on your areas of weakness, but really focus your revision. There's no doubt in 2 weeks, I'd prefer if you're doing it for 3 months. I like people on the package for 3 months, but if you've only got 2 weeks, it will still make a difference. So go for it. Don't just do questions. Don't just go onto a question bank and do 1,000 questions in the next 2 weeks. It doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. Sorry. I was scared, Liz, then. That was a bit scary. I was scared myself. So a question, again, that we had earlier in the week was, is the AKT updated regularly in line with NICE guidelines? And if so, how often? Yeah, I mean,
the main bulk of the paper is set in March for each year. So the paper that you're sitting in January of 2018 was set in, or the main bulk of it was set in March 2017. And so the vast majority of it, nothing has changed over that period of time. And the vast majority will go on the current accepted guidance in UK general practice. And by and large, we use NICE because that's our governing, our guiding body. Obviously, the Scots use SIGN, which is the Scottish equivalent of NICE. And really, SIGN feeds into NICE. So it's rare that SIGN differs hugely from NICE, although, you know, there are points at which SIGN are ahead of NICE, and some of their guidance is excellent. But really, go for what's in the BNF. It's almost always NICE. There may be a little bit of feeding in from SIGN, but if in doubt, go for NICE guidance. And in the question, it will state it. So it will say, in accordance with current NICE guidance, you know, the first stage of asthma management is X, and there'll be a series of choices. So it will tell you, but by and large, it's NICE.
I think we've probably just got time for one more question. If we haven't answered your question in this session, then we'll try and get through the comments and just get back to you that way. Alternatively, you can always contact us through 14Fish's website, support@14fish.com, and we'll try and answer all the questions we can. So the last question is, what would your advice be to people who are taking the exam second or third time around?
Yeah, it's not uncommon to have to resit the AKT. I think two of the biggest mistakes are that you get into the mindset that there's a problem with the exam. So you don't like the exam and you think the exam's against you, and it's not. You know, the examiners can't see who you are. We don't, you know, it's anonymously marked. So it doesn't matter how many times you sat the exam. If you take a fresh approach, you can pass. If you failed the exam before, don't go and do the same thing. I mean, I've been dealing with a lot of failures in the last couple of years. And the common theme is that they continue to do the same method of learning. And by and large, that's going on and doing lots of questions, going on one of the big question banks. Most of the question banks are set by ST2s, medical ST2s in hospital. And so although the questions do cover the major topics that you want to know for the exam, it's not written in a way that we're going to ask. So our questions on 14Fish and on the exam are set by GPs, which is important. So if you're just doing questions, you've got to find another way. You need to get some clinical knowledge behind you. So either go on to our clinical update videos, or you need to look at the question, and rather than learn the question, you know, which will be very specific, think if it's a question about asthma and I'm not that sure about asthma, I need to look at the whole topic. So if you're going to use question banks, use them to guide your revision. Don't use question banks to learn how to pass the exam. I've heard it so many times. You know, I was told if I did 2,000 questions, I'll pass the exam. You won't. That's a bit final, wasn't it? Sorry.
Thank you everyone for joining us, and sorry we didn't get around to answering all the questions, but like I said, we will answer as many as we can in the comments, and always do contact us at 14Fish directly, and we'll try and answer as many as we can from there. So,
and yeah, thanks very much for joining us. I know that a lot of you have probably had quite a busy day in surgery. If it's been anything like mine, you know, it's a busy time of year. So thanks very much for joining us, and really good luck. Do focus your revision, because over the next 2 weeks you can make a massive difference.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye now.